Coming up on Anglia News in half an hour, the human shield. The man who threw himself in front of his wife as a grenade exploded. And wide awake minutes out of surgery, the new anaesthetic being trialled in Cambridge. Join me for those stories and more after ITN.
ITN News at 10 with Trevor MacDonald.
Majors gamble to contain a Euroskeptic revolt. Tobacco companies pay billions to settle health claims. Crisis for Netanyahu as Israeli police threaten charges. And a dealer's reaction as his bank is fined £2 million. Good evening. The Prime Minister abandoned what should have been today's election campaign theme and threw himself instead into a dramatic defence of his wait-and-see policy on Europe. Faced with a revived Eurosceptic rebellion which threatened to wreck the Conservative election campaign, Mr Major begged his party, like him or loathe him, not to bind his hands. Signing up to or ruling out a single European currency now, he said, would be splendidly decisive, but would send him naked into the conference chamber. Labour said it showed weak leadership. The Liberal Democrats talked of civil war in the Conservative Party. Our political editor, Michael Brunson, reports.
The Prime Minister back in Downing Street tonight, after a day which the latest crisis over Europe within his party has turned upside down. Tonight's party election broadcast was changed at the last minute. Mr Major's straight Eurosceptic-sounding appeal to the nation. I'd have to agree first to a single currency, and then the Cabinet, Parliament, and finally, you, the voters in a referendum, replaced one planned on the economy. And the economy and jobs, with statements by Gillian Shepherd and the Chancellor, should have been the subject of the morning's presentation. That too was scrapped with an hour to go and replaced by a passionate, off-the-cuff explanation by Mr Major of why the two junior ministers, John Horam and James Pace, were off-message on the single currency.
Can anybody honestly put their hand on their heart and say that they know for certain what the outcome would be if we were to decide now precipitately, without the details at this moment, that never in any circumstances were we going to decide to enter a European currency? Can anybody truly know the answer to that question? I don't believe anybody can honestly say that they do.
Mr Major listed at length the pros and cons of joining or not joining, and yes, he'd heard people say he should be more decisive.
It would be splendidly decisive, they say. So splendidly decisive, you would send a British Prime Minister naked into that conference chamber with nothing to negotiate and nothing with which to ring the best deal for the United Kingdom. What I am saying is, no one in this room doubts these are the most important negotiations we've had. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, like me or loathe me, don't bind my hands when I am negotiating on behalf of the British nation.
That heartfelt appeal, another twist in this extraordinary press conference. The Prime Minister running the show, Party Chairman and Chancellor mostly just listening, and he continued with what sounded like a demand for a full apology, but not the sack for Mr Horam and Mr Pace.
They realise that they're bound by collective responsibility. They acknowledge that they should have been bound by that collective responsibility, and it was very unwise of them to act as they did over the last 24 hours. They both understand that fully. And I think they will both tell you that, if you ask them that.
Well, ITN did go back and ask John Horam, but what he said didn't quite amount to a full apology.
There is a problem here for a candidate because you are asked straightforward questions about your personal views. And I responded personally as a candidate to those requests.
Because your personal views surely don't fit with government policy. Government policy is to wait and see. Your personal view is that we should not have a single currency.
My personal view is we shouldn't have a single currency, as things stand at the moment, but equally, we haven't got to that point yet.
Mr Horam may regard that as staying loyal, but the opposition leaders say that the Tories are more divided than ever on Europe.
Look, Britain cannot be represented by a government with all the leadership qualities of lemmings. Now, Britain cannot be represented by a government that is fighting amongst themselves, and therefore they cannot fight for Britain.
Well, last year we had the beef war. Yesterday we had the fish war. Now we have the Tory party at civil war. Britain's best interests simply cannot be met by a party that's at war with itself. Britain needs leadership on Europe, and it's now absolutely clear that it will not get it from the Conservative Party. They will get it from the Liberal Democrats, who are now the only party united on Europe and Britain's only guarantee of a referendum.
For a short time today, and with Lady Thatcher's help, Mr Major's campaigning effort was focused on jobs. Close to the point on Teesside, where she had once stood amid industrial dereliction, they both planted a tree. There are more jobs there now. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
And Michael Brunson is with me now in the studio. Mike, what a dramatic day. For a while it seemed it was imploding all around Mr Major.
You know, tonight the Central Office people are saying, you do realise, don't you, Mr Major was always going to have a point in this campaign where he was going to explain Europe. This was just it. And you sort of rub your eyes at the end of the day today and say, no, this wasn't just another campaigning day. This was quite extraordinary. And the parallel that goes through my mind is when Mr Major was forced to call us all into the Rose Garden 2 years ago and say, look, I've had enough. I'm not putting up with this. I'm going to have a leadership contest. I think it was on that parallel. And in essence, during the course of that extraordinary press conference, he was saying two things. He was saying to the party, for heaven's sake, get off my back. But then over and above that, he has gone, and through his broadcast tonight, to say to the country, look, please trust me, because whatever happens, Amsterdam or whatever, you're going to get a better negotiator in me than Tony Blair. He's had to go, as it were, right over the heads of his party almost to the country with this direct appeal.
And the $64,000 question, will it work?
Well, I don't think we're going to get any more ministers, cabinet or otherwise, actually crossing the line. But you see the sort of pressures that are going on at the moment. We've got two more tonight. Roger Evans, for example, who's a minister, no more powers to Brussels, he's saying in his letter. Eric Fort, education and employment. He's saying no further loss of sovereignty. Now, we know what this means. We know what this means. No further loss of sovereignty is a not very coded way of saying I'm not going to have a single currency, but they're just this side of the line. We should just say, to finish with, there are Labour rebels. Of course there are. There's one Liberal Democrat, Nick Harvey. A couple of Labour rebels have now come out, Dennis Canavan and Denzil Davis. But what you're seeing from the opposition parties is much more discipline than you're seeing from within the Conservative Party.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. The Labour leader set out today what he called his 7 pillars of a decent society, among them strong families and social institutions. Mr Blair said for 18 years Britain had had a politics of self instead of a politics of society, and by it, he said, we had lost, not gained. Our campaign correspondent Mark Webster reports.
Speaking to an invited audience, Mr Blair tried to step outside the political wrangling and show he had a positive vision of Britain's future. His 7 pillars for a decent society covered education, health and housing. But he also had a sideswipe at the Tories.
After 18 years of Conservative government, Britain is more divided and less equal than at any point in time since the Second World War. I want a Britain which prides itself on the quality of its education system, the efficiency of its health service, and the success of its welfare state in caring for the weak while helping others into work. A Britain where we understand that opportunity plus responsibility equals community.
It was time, he said, to put morality back into political life.
We judge this country by the condition of the weak as much as the strong, and that opportunity is there for all our people, not just for a few people at the very top. Basic, decent values.
But his talk of a decent society brought an immediate counterattack from the other parties.
I don't criticise Tony Blair for some of the principles set out in his speech. The point is that the practice, the policies, the minimum wage, the social chapter, the attack on grant-maintained schools would have completely the opposite effect of what he claims for them.
I agree with his analysis that society is very divided, but the Labour Party is not answering the essential question. How do you pay for policies to remove the division in British political life?
Turning down the opportunity to kiss another baby in Monmouthshire, Labour said it would continue to avoid negative campaigning.
After a largely defensive campaign last week, when Labour was put on the spot on issues like privatisation, they now say they're going to be much more positive in tone, and they won't be paying nearly as much attention to accusations from the Conservatives.
For all that, Labour will be attacking the Tories' record on the health service in the coming days. Mark Webster, News at 10, Monmouthshire.
The Liberal Democrats announced today that they'd slap a new tax on the water companies. Not a windfall tax like Labour, but what they called a waterfall levy of 2% on pre-tax profits. It would be spent on repairing leaky mains. ITN's Caroline Kerr reports.
England is suffering its driest spring for 200 years, but today was the first time water conservation became a campaign issue. The Liberal Democrats said they'd tax water companies which failed to meet targets on reducing wastage.
The Conservative government have refused to set compulsory targets on the water companies. We will set compulsory targets, and if they don't meet those targets, they will suffer financial penalties. So it will be in their financial interests to sort out this ludicrous situation where a third of Britain's water very nearly is simply leaking away.
The Liberal Democrats say every day more than 1 billion gallons of water are wasted. The Labour Party say they're also concerned about the issue, though it doesn't get a specific mention in their manifesto. Nonetheless, they say they could cut leakage by half.
I think that the most immediate thing that the water companies could do is to offer a free leakage repair service to customers. They could get on with that quickly, save a lot of the water that's being wasted.
The Tories say a tax on the privatised water companies isn't necessary. Besides, they aren't to blame for leakage.
Well, the reason there's leakage problems is that for all those years of nationalisation, nobody invested in the water companies. We've now been spending £3,000 million a year investing and improving the water, and now we will be able to deal with the leaks all over the country. But you do that by telling them to do it. You don't collect the money in and then share it out again. That's just balmy.
We may be heading for drought, but the truth is water conservation is not a top priority for any of the parties. Caroline Kerr, News at 10.
Other election news now. Labour's Marjorie Molan was north of the border today, wooing voters in Scotland. The Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary went to a factory in Dumfries, which specialises in recycling computers. The Health Secretary, Stephen Dorrell, was in Leeds having a look at how things used to be done. During his visit, he made a tour of the city's Thackeray Medical Museum, the first in the country. In the West Country, Liberal Democrat campaigner Shirley Williams was out on the stump meeting shoppers in Bath. She later visited the city's sports centre and was one of the speakers at a rally there this evening. In this election, we're not only following the leaders, we're also watching other senior political figures from all the parties to see the force and the style they bring to the campaign. Penny Marshall reports now on the Labour Deputy Leader, John Prescott.
With 5,000 miles behind him and 5,000 still to go, this traditional campaigner is pressing the flesh of the people to get them to come out and vote.
Hello, here's my calling card anyway.
Old-style electioneering with a modern spin, he calls it. 2 years of sophisticated research has told the Labour Party exactly where their man needs to call. The Prescott Express is carrying the Deputy Leader on a whistle-stop tour of target seats where Labour turnout has previously been low. On board are essentials, computers, communications, black coffee, all sustaining this proven campaigner now fighting his 9th election.
I probably have met more people than any other politician in this campaign. I'm now coming up to my 50th constituency seat I'm visiting, out of the 90 that we've designated as the battleground in this election.
Blitzing lunchtime shoppers, Mr Prescott hopes his rhetoric brings politicians and people together.
Looking for a heckler and thought I might have had one. It's usually Mr Heseltine skulking in the background with the chicken, but...
It's an attempt to bring the issues into the marketplace, but not everyone today stopped to listen.
I'm on my way to the hairdressers. Can I not come? Is he Labour or Conservative?
At the end of the day, they're all saying the same sort of thing.
Tonight he addressed the party faithful, his aim to rouse them to campaign with his own traditional style. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Loughborough.
Other news now. Last month it was a small tobacco company, Liggett. Today it was disclosed that at least 2 of the biggest are now negotiating with American state attorneys general about compensation for illnesses caused by smoking. Freedom from endless lawsuits could cost the tobacco companies $300 billion over the next 25 years. Our Washington correspondent James Mates reports.
For decades, the tobacco companies have fought every attempt to make them liable for the damage done by smoking. Now they are suing for peace. On offer is believed to be $300 billion over 25 years in return for an end to all lawsuits against them. Tobacco ads will disappear from billboards and characters like the Marlboro Man and Joe Camel will be killed off. President Clinton is said to be watching the negotiations carefully. Just yesterday, he was reminding an audience of children that the head of one tobacco firm now admitted his product can kill.
I hope the other tobacco companies will follow his lead and tell the truth and stop trying to sell their products to adults and not to kids.
The United States Congress would have to approve any deal. Many Democrats wonder if the tobacco firms will be getting off too lightly, though they concede this is a big step forward.
an agreement could be truly historic. It could be the beginning of the end of America's deadliest addiction.
Some in the anti-smoking lobby believe they have the cigarette firms on the run and that this is no time to settle. As if to confirm their fears, tobacco shares rose sharply today, despite news of the massive payouts being proposed. James Mates, News at 10, Washington.
Coming up next on News at 10 tonight, today's other top stories: Netanyahu's future on a knife edge. Will allegations of fraud bring him down? The high-risk dealing that cost the bank £2 million in fines. And we all know that spring came early this year. Tonight, scientists explain why.
The Rover 400 suspension has been tuned to reduce tiredness on a long journey.
Red or blue?
So if you need to arrive fresh and alert, make sure you're driving one.
How do you get soft skin when you shower? Choose a shower gel with the same pH as healthy skin to help maintain its natural moisture balance. Anything else? Choose a shower gel with added moisturizers for extra skin softness. Choose Johnson's pH 5.5 2-in-1 shower gel. Its added moisturizers leave your skin feeling healthy and so soft, it's as if you'd used a body lotion. Try it and feel the difference.
New Lurpak Spreadable. Smoother by half.
Taster? Oh, that's new. Turkey, I'd say. In fact, it's Bernard Matthews' new turkey creations. Really tender, really tasty. And that topping, that's a bit special, sire. Fresh mushrooms in cream, crunchy crumbs, and yes, a hint of cracked pepper. Aha! Then again, Squire. Tangy cheese and leek creations.
New turkey creations from Bernard Matthews. So good, it's easy to get carried away. Low, but not as low as the fuel prices at Esso.
Buy your glasses from Dolland & Aitchison this summer and they'll give you a free pair of prescription sunglasses. Dolland & Aitchison, where everyone gets star treatment.
When you're busy and the number's engaged, just press 5. For just 10p, BT's ringback service will keep trying it for you.
Champagne? Nice, please.
And it'll ring you back when the line becomes free.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, big trouble. How long for a souffle?
Don't try and try. Just press 5.
Welcome back. Israeli police said today that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should stand trial for fraud and breach of trust. In the report on an influence peddling scandal, they said there was enough evidence against him to bring charges. That could mean new elections. Our senior foreign correspondent Michael Nicholson reports from Jerusalem.
This could mark the end of the shortest career of any Israeli Prime Minister, even bring down his coalition government. The allegations of fraud concerns this man, Aryeh Deri, a former minister, a close friend of the Prime Minister, and who's currently on trial for embezzling government funds. Together with the Israeli Minister of Justice, Sachi Anegbi, it's alleged they persuaded the Prime Minister to appoint an Attorney General of their own choice in return for political favours. After 12 weeks of investigation, The police have now recommended the indictment of both the Justice Minister and the Prime Minister, and it'll now be up to the State Attorney to accept or reject their charges. From the very start of these investigations, Prime Minister Netanyahu has denied the charges, called them nonsense, and has issued what amounts to a challenge. Indict me, he says, and I'll resign. But the feeling here is that the police would not have proceeded with these charges against their own Prime Minister had they not been cast iron sure, which is why tonight the Israeli media are calling this, in their own words, a political earthquake. Michael Nicholson, News at 10, Jerusalem.
Here, the city watchdog IMRO fined the fund managers Morgan Grenfell a record £2 million today for breaking investment rules. It said the mismanagement of 3 funds had caused unnecessary concern to an enormous number of investors. Howell Jones reports.
At Morgan Grenfell, the cost of mismanagement is being counted in the millions. One banker broke the city's rules, buying into high-risk investments not listed on the stock market. The investment regulator, IMRO, has imposed an unprecedented fine, £2 million. Peter Young is the banker at the centre of the scandal. He gave ITN his reaction to the fine.
Well, I think that, the size of the fine is the kind of size which people have been talking about, which was expected.
More than 90,000 investors are being compensated by Morgan Grenfell at a cost which far exceeds even the record fine. Here at Morgan Grenfell's offices, £2 million might seem like a drop in the ocean compared to the total cost to the company of this episode. One estimate puts the final bill at more than £400 million. Howell Jones, News at 10, in the city.
The official death toll from yesterday's fire in Mecca in Saudi Arabia has now risen to more than 340. 2 million worshippers continued praying near Mount Arafat today at the climax of their pilgrimage. More than 1,200 people are thought to have been injured in yesterday's blaze. Back to the election now, and it's one which could give Scotland something it's not had for 290 years, a parliament of its own. We've been seeing what impact that possibility is having north of the border. But first, a reminder of where the parties stand on the issue. The Conservatives alone oppose a separate Scottish Parliament. Labour support a Scottish Parliament if the Scottish people vote yes in a referendum. The Liberal Democrats want a devolved Parliament with powers to vary taxes. The Scottish National Party want a Scotland not only with its own Parliament, but with full independence. ITN's David Rose has our special report.
This is what makes the general election in Scotland different. If the polls are to be believed, Edinburgh and Scotland will have a new parliament sitting here by the turn of the century. But a Scottish parliament isn't enough for the Scottish National Party and their leader, Alex Salmond. Canvassing in a sunny Edinburgh, Mr Salmond knows he must eat into Labour's massive Scottish majority.
Tony Blair would pinch more in your ice cream. Well, we're putting forward head and heart. We're putting forward economic arguments to appeal to that sense of hard-headedness, that canniness, and we're also tugging at the heartstrings. We're saying, look, this is also about the future, it's about pride, it's about self-respect.
As we leave the capital, I wonder if many Scots won't think a Scottish Parliament there is a big enough step for now.
I would like a Scottish Parliament at first, possibly a bit lead on to independence.
Within my lifetime, hopefully, I think we will see an independent Scotland.
I'm going to be voting Conservative in the election because I believe in the Union.
The first thing I want to find out is whether the Conservatives, who are down to just 10 seats in Scotland, can hang on yet again, or whether they're going to suffer further damage.
The fair city of Perth stretches along the banks of the Silvery Tay. At the heart of Scotland, this is the gateway to the Highlands.
Are you at school?
The Conservatives, led by Michael Forsyth, are fighting hard here by damning an independent Scotland and a Scottish Parliament.
The idea of having it for a Scottish Parliament?
Yeah. The tartan tax.
Scotland has been transformed. When I was first elected in 1983, Scotland was really in decline. People were worried about what would replace coal, steel and shipbuilding. It's now one of the most prosperous parts of the United Kingdom.
What I also want to find out is whether some Scots may feel Mr Blair has sold them out to get English votes. But first, whether the Liberal Democrats may be squeezed in the almighty battle between the other three parties.
60 miles northeast of Perth, Stonehaven huddles snugly around its ancient fishing harbour. Jim Wallace leads the Liberal Democrats, campaigning here for a Scottish Parliament and higher health and education standards.
And seeing the penny on tax, does that concern you? Or?
The penny on tax? No, makes good sense.
We are the party which, on education, on health, on housing, on jobs, have some very clear policies and costed policies, and I think that message is getting through to the people.
On the train and in the polls, a clear majority say they'll vote Labour.
I'm sick to death of Conservative policies.
I'm going to vote for Labour, and I'm voting because of education.
But some are planning to vote SNP because they don't like Mr Blair.
If John Smith had still been here, I would certainly have voted for him because he seemed like a true person.
Journey's End in Inverness, part of Britain's only four-way marginal. George Robertson, who leads Labour, says they haven't sold out, but must win a majority at Westminster in order to secure a parliament in Edinburgh.
I hope that for the new millennium there will be a new devolved Scottish Parliament, the first in 300 years sitting, strengthening and uniting this country as a whole, but giving the Scots a much greater say in their own affairs, but remaining firmly part of the United Kingdom.
The polls suggest 20% of Scotland's voters still haven't decided. David Rose, News at 10, Inverness.
Tonight's soccer, Leicester and Middlesbrough's replay of the Coca-Cola Cup final is still going on. The game went into extra time. Highlights will be on ITV later, so if you don't want to know the latest score, look away now. In tonight's Premiership games, Jamie Redknapp put Liverpool 1-up in the Merseyside derby. Duncan Ferguson equalised for Everton. 1-1 was the final score. Alan Shearer scored twice for Newcastle as they beat Chelsea 3-1. And Dean Holdsworth scored Wimbledon's first after 19 minutes against Leeds. The final score was 2-0. The winning numbers in tonight's National Lottery are 3, 6, 9, 19, 37, 48. The bonus number is 25. Two winners shared the £3.3 million jackpot. The main headline again, the Prime Minister has thrown himself into a dramatic defence of his wait-and-see policy on Europe. And finally, scientists confirmed today what many of us had already suspected, that spring has come a little early this year, and what's more, they think they know why. Scenes like this one in a Wiltshire wood, say American climatologists, have been unthinkable in mid-April 30 years ago. They found evidence through satellite surveillance that global warming has brought forward the growing season in northern Europe by a week. So spring flowers really do bloom earlier. And that's the way the news looks tonight. We're back tomorrow. From all of us here at ITN, good night.
There's a problem with dandruff in animals.